Hello, 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 and we are live. How is everyone in the chat? I have a few guests that I'm going to pull in a few minutes. I just want to give people a few thoughts and a bit of structure to this discussion. I know a lot of people are afraid. They are looking at this, they are wondering what has happened, how it happened, and I just want to give my thoughts really, really quickly. Hello. Mike Hall likes the music. Thank you. It's a bit weird having a little bit of a jazz track before such an important political discussion, but sure, we need the little bit of a break. So before I bring my guests in, I want to discuss first of all what happened on Wednesday, why it happened, who was there. Is it the beginning of a new civil war in America, and what happens next? What is insurrection? When they talk about insurrection, what do they actually mean? And can it be characterized as such? Because a lot of people don't understand these terms in their natural terms. So I would argue that it was not an insurrection as such. It was definitely a riot, but it was not an insurrection. So let's go over a little bit of what happened. And for this, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to go through the protest as it was occurring. And then I want to get a little bit of professional reactions. So I'm going to look at the late night hosts. And thankfully, there is a collection of late night hosts reactions. So we're going to get a little bit of that. And then I'm going to bring my guests in and have a bit of a conversation. So thank you all for being here. I know it's a very serious situation. I know it's a very serious topic and a lot of people are worried. They want to understand this. So let's do it together. For that, I'm going to share my screen. God love you all, because you're going to have to put up with me and my inability to tech. So let's have a look. This is what happened on the
really surreal moment.
Capitol
I've never seen this before.
of Washington,
I've been here for a
D.C.
lot of big events. The vice president who was presiding over the Senate chamber was hustled out. I wasn't able to see the video because
and it is on fast forward
over the loudspeaker, and I can't tell you how much that never happened. It happened, during an earthquake a while back. I mean, it just never happened. They said, it was emergency.
So this is the original footage. This is the original people breaking through the windows, people breaking through the doors, so people understand what's actually happening here. This is the first that they're actually being, the news outlets are being told what's happening.
The overhead announcement at the end to get more urgent: barricade the doors if you can't seek shelter. Barricade the doors wherever you are. Members were huddled on the floor. I could see Mitch McConnell on his phone when we came back up. So it is truly a surreal scene. It's really quite frightening. I've never seen anything like
Trish, stay on the phone with me because I just want to update our viewers. We are getting alerts from inside the Capitol right now that the Capitol has been breached. This is coming from Capitol Police. The staff at the Capitol has been notified. We understand both houses are now in recess. As Mary mentioned, they were debating the objections to the electoral votes that were going to be ratified. Usually a symbolic day. Joe Biden will be the next president. This was just sort of a symbolic gesture where they ratify the electoral votes in both chambers of Congress during this joint session. And then this large group of pro-Trump demonstrators approached the Capitol. And now that we know they are inside the Capitol, Trish, talk to our viewers who maybe haven't had the chance to go and visit and to really watch democracy in action when you enter the Capitol. You have to go through metal detectors. There are narrow doorways. It's not like you can just storm in with a crowd of people.
That's right. That's right, Tom. You can't get in easily. And especially now during the pandemic, the campus is closed to the public. So, getting in, you have to have credentials. Lately, for this particular session, they've had bike racks up. They've had cordons all around the Capitol. There are checkpoints we had to go through. I think I counted 3. Then once you make it to the Senate building or the House, you have to, like you said, you have to go through security. You go through a MAG. You can't bring, it's not easy to get in here. There are men with guns everywhere. So I just can't tell you how shocking it is to hear. I mean, colleagues were shouting, cops were running. These people had made it into the Capitol, and it's just really hard to believe. We even heard there might have been a plan for us to hustle everybody onto the Senate chamber, and I can't even imagine what that would have been like. But that's the word that was going out from one of the galleries here who deals with the media, and so it's truly a shocking scene here.
So I'm going to stop it there. So that's what happened. People forcefully broke through the barriers, which were piss poor to begin with, ran through the police. This was the Capitol Police, which were very few and far between, and stormed the Capitol building. That's what it's been labeled as. Scary scenes. Very, very scary scenes. I want to pull up I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to pull up the late night hosts. This is what the late night hosts, and yes, that's RNLP. A lot of people are worried about Western democracies here. So I'm going to pull up the late night hosts discussion now, or the reactions now. And then I just want to show people what Trump actually said and why a lot of us, I'm not really on the left, I'd be center left, why a lot of us believe that he should be held accountable for what transpired on Wednesday. So again, I'm going to share my screen, and so you can actually hear the shock of a lot of the commentators, political commentators, and that is me. So yeah, this is the shock of the political commentators responding immediately to what had happened.
Hey, Republicans who supported this president, especially the ones in the joint session of Congress today, have you had enough? After 5 years of coddling this president's fascist rhetoric, guess whose followers want to burn down the Reichstag? Because today, the U.S. Capitol was overrun for the first time since 1814, and a woman died. Who could have seen this coming? Everyone, even dummies like me. This is the most shocking, most tragic, least surprising thing I've ever seen.
This is what happens when there's no peaceful transition of power and what happens when there's bad leadership. This is not how you lose.
The president wanted this. He directed it, supported it, he incited it, and encouraged it.
People walking around with the flag upside down, thinking they're patriotic. Today was not patriotism. Today was terrorism.
What we saw today was a violent insurgency, an attempt to overthrow the legitimately elected government of the United States. And it was incited, directed, and encouraged by the president, Donald Trump, and more than a few members of the Republican Party and right-wing media.
For the Republican senators who helped foment this insurrection, why'd you run away? I mean, these are your peeps. They love you. Why didn't you hang out with your buddies, Marsha Blackburn, Kelly Loeffler, Ron Johnson, John, not that Kennedy, because you can run all you want for the rest of your lives, but you can never escape the responsibility of what you brought upon American democracy today.
The people who listen to Donald Trump, to the Republican Party, to Fox News and all the rest, what they've been told for years, and what they were told again today, was that their country was being stolen from them, that shadowy groups and powerful forces were coming for them, that they should never accept defeat, that they should fight.
Daddy Donnie did have a message for his supporters. He kind of maybe a little bit told them to go home and that he understands where they're coming from and loves them very much. For real, that's what he said about the rioters.
I wouldn't want to even imagine his treatment or response to those people if they had been wearing Black Lives Matter hats instead of red MAGA ones.
Police were very laid back compared to the Black Lives Matter protests. Some were seen taking selfies with the criminals. Others seemed to welcome them through the gates. It was a terrible day in the history of this country.
Enough is enough. Today was a disgrace. Today was disappointing. But sadly, today was not a surprise. But it's important to remember that this is not who we are. I assure you, there are more good people than there are bad.
It felt hopeless. And I got to thinking, I thought, I hope when the dust settles and we reflect on what's happened on this awful day, that we still have hope. Because I think if there is one thing we can have after the last month in this country, it's hope.
Remind me, are we great again yet?
Sorry for the inability to tech. So yeah, historical philosopher says they're not political commentators, they're comedians. They are comedians, but they're also political commentators. And it's amazing when the comedians are the ones that are making most sense. The reason why I'm not showing ABC or MSNBC or any of those is because of the sensationalization that they're surrounded in at the moment. And yes, there is a lot of shock. There is a lot of shock. The reason why I showed this is because it gets to the heart of what most commentators are saying. And because of the monologues being so political, and their monologues are very, very political, it just goes to show the deep level of shock without getting too much into it. So the last thing before I bring in the guests, and I promise I will bring in the guests, I want to show you really quickly two things. First of all, this is Trump's statement. Trump urged his supporters to march on the Capitol where Congress meets. He said, in quote, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard today." I'll come back to the other thing, but I want to bring in some guests here now. Vishanti and Leo. Vishanti, what's your reaction to what's been happening over the last couple of days?
Rage.
Just rage.
Rage. I mean, I can expound on that, obviously, but the essence of it is rage, because we're literally listening to pundits say, who could have seen this coming? Literally everyone. They weren't subtle. This has been planned. They weren't posting it in secret chats that you had to be an insider to get. They were open on Twitter, open on Parler, open on Reddit, open on 4chan and 8kun. This was not a secret. They had t-shirts printed. We literally saw this coming. Federal law enforcement knew this was happening and just decided, So yeah, rage. Because I was out in the street protesting last summer, and we were met with force just for marching around, just for walking around demanding that police stop killing Black people for existing. We were carrying signs, and we were met with riot gear, armed, militia type, resistors. We were met with assault rifles being brandished, incredible displays of force. And these assholes get to assemble on the Capitol property, listen to their guy in chief tell them, yeah, we're going to march right over there. And the police went, no, stop, don't. Yeah, that's why rage.
Leo, what can be said about the run-up, the days in the run-up to the event? Because there's been a few instances where aides for the senators and the House of Representatives were saying what's actually in place. There was very little preparedness, it would seem. The Pentagon also came out and said that they had 2 days before the event offered the National Guard, and the Capitol Police said no. What is your thoughts on the whole lack of preparation for what actually transpired?
Well, the Pentagon actually did not offer the Capitol Police the National Guard. The Capitol Police requested the National Guard, and the Pentagon rejected it. The mayor or the governor of Maryland requested the National Guard, and the Pentagon again rejected it. It wasn't until almost an hour and a half or 2 hours into this attempted fascist coup of our government, because that's what it was. It was domestic terrorism. It was an insurrection. It was an attempted coup by a bunch of illiterate fascists. It wasn't until a few hours into it that they were like, yeah, I guess we can send out the National Guard.
Well, I mean, the Pentagon were saying today that 3 or 4 days before the event, they were making plans, or they were attempting to make plans with Capitol Police. and they rejected the help.
Personally, I don't trust anything that comes out of the Pentagon, especially when it's serving under a pseudo-fascist government.
Understandable. Completely understandable. I mean, again, Vishanti hit on the nail on the head there when she talked about BLM protesters, and so much has been made about when peaceful protesters went and stood outside the Capitol. They were met with tear gas. They were met with riot police. They were met with dogs. It's day and night, really.
Yeah, and I literally sat there and watched news coverage of people who were protesting for healthcare, many of which were physically disabled, in wheelchairs, being handcuffed and dragged out of the Capitol building.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember the video of them literally picking up, I think it was a man in a wheelchair and carrying him out.
Yeah, and that's why I'm rage. It's a lot of those things. We've clearly seen that when they want to defend that building and the properties around it, they can and they will. They simply did not want to, because many of them are sympathetic to that cause. We saw them taking selfies with the people who had broken into the Capitol building. We saw them literally high-fiving people outside. We saw one of them holding a lady's hand as she was walking down the stairs after being casually escorted outside, just like a casual Sunday stroll. Like, y'all.
Just real quick. Those in the chat, if there are any people here who disagree with what's been said on the screen, please allow them to speak. There is a lot of charged emotion, and I understand that. Unless they're actually being abusive, please don't time them out or block them. So just let them speak. Words in this chat anyway, words are not going to harm us. But we will get back to that. I just want to actually read off a list of some of the groups and some of the individuals that we saw in the Capitol there on Wednesday. QAnon. There were many people there from the organization body of QAnon. The Proud Boys obviously were there. They were some of the people that were helping to organize smashing up of the windows and stuff like that. There's a commentator called Baked Alaska. Now, if you look at Baked Alaska, he is a known white supremacist.
I believe Nick Fuentes was also there.
He was. Richard Barnett. He was the one in Nancy Pelosi's office. He's from Stop the Steal group. Again, a white supremacist group. There was the Tea Party, had their Gadsden flag out. Rick Saccone, who was a former Penn State rep. Women for America First, and the Silent Majority. Now, the woman has been named who died, who was shot and killed in the Capitol. Her name was Ashley Babbitt. And the day before the demonstration, she said, "Nothing will stop us. They can try and try and try, but the storm is here, and it is descending upon DC in less than 24 hours, dark to light." That goes to show really her intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And the intentions were extreme far-right groups who wanted to disrupt democracy.
It's true that this is far-right, but I prefer to call it what it is. These were fascists. These were literally fascists.
I would also like to take that to another conclusion as well and say that a lot of these people in the audience were actual neo-Nazis. They were wearing t-shirts. One guy had a hoodie on that said Camp Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. One guy had a shirt on standing outside in Proud Boy black and yellow that said 6MWE, which stands for 6 million wasn't enough, referring to the Holocaust.
These are Holocaust deniers, white supremacists, white nationalists.
Yeah, and Christian nationalists too, because there was video that I have saved of a lot of these guys literally erecting a giant wooden cross outside. I was sitting there staring at this, waiting for them to just ignite it, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's neo-Nazism.
Exactly. And another thing that was pointed out that I saw on Twitter, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, is in 1863 or 4, whenever it was, the Confederate Army during an actual literal war was incapable of carrying their flag all the way to the Capitol. That flag has never been carried into the Capitol until January 6th by white nationalist, fascist insurrectionists at the behest of the President of the United States of America, co-opted by numerous Republican Party senators and House representatives.
Yeah.
Well, let's just talk really quickly about the comparisons, I suppose, to the American Civil War and the run-up to the American Civil War, because it is stark. How the American Civil War, for those of you who haven't studied American politics or American history, kind of came about because of abolitionism. And Abraham Lincoln, as one of the leading abolitionists in his state, becomes president. Some of the more conservative slave states get up in arms and launch a real insurrection, which sparks the movement towards. And you actually seen some of the states come out of the Union temporarily. But there is a fracture point between the states, which starts the Civil War. Lincoln was elected in 1860. Civil War lasts from 1861 to 1865. Are we seeing the run-up to another? Do you guys think, because it's all well and good, I have the distance, I'm able to look at this from a different perspective. Do you feel, living there, we are seeing a run-up to another civil war? I mean, of course, they're not as organized, and I'll go into that in a little while as to why I don't think they're as organized. But do you think we're seeing the possibility of another civil war?
No. Maybe in a Cold War sense, where there's just a bunch of banter thrown back and forth in demonstrations like this, but in terms of like an actual war, no. Mainly because we have the National Guard now. It's not going to happen.
I don't think that we'll see a repeat in the sense of states trying to secede and start their own independent government. I believe that the Civil War in this case is largely cultural, but it has gotten to the point where it hasn't been challenged enough or rooted out to stop it from escalating to violence. And in that sense, yeah, we're having a newer version of it because it's the same idea that white supremacy and whiteness is the center of these people's motivation. They do not see non-whites as equal. They don't see them as, legitimately human. In the Civil War, the first one that we had, there was literally a compromise. Like, well, Black people are 3/5 of a person. That's a compromise. They didn't want them empowered. They didn't want their voice in any public sphere. Every time there has been a movement to empower non-white vote, there has been an extreme white backlash. We saw that during Reconstruction with, the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. We saw that with Jim Crow laws. We saw that with poll taxes and so forth. This idea has taken such a root in American fabric of its, society, I guess, that any challenge to it is met with extreme backlash, and sometimes, many times, most of the time, violence and lynchings, and in the 1800s, actual war. People took up arms.
Well, that's it exactly. That's why a lot of people have been drawing the conclusion that it is very, very similar. I think that, as you said, the main difference is there are strategies in place now to kind of prevent that. But if you look at the American Civil War, it was a direct response to the idea that slaves might be freed. In the same way that this recent unrest, we saw a few years ago, Congresswoman Giffords being shot. We saw a number of different attacks on politicians, on the likes of the abortion clinics. We saw someone go in and shoot up in there. We've seen an escalation over a decade, really. And it's culminated in a riot on the Capitol, a literal riot in the Capitol. And I mean, Tusk talks about a class war, culture war, instead of a Cold War. And that's what a lot of people are asking at the moment and are fearful.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think
it's a lot of those.
I think that the class war has pretty much, and the culture war has pretty much already started. And I think it started probably a little bit before Trump, but Trump has just thrown so much fuel onto that fire, and this is where we're at now. My biggest fear is that the Biden administration won't actually do anything substantive to address these issues. Our elected officials won't actually do anything substantive to address this problem, which is going to further normalize these events happening. Just like they said, in 1923, Hitler attempted a coup and it failed. Nobody did anything. Nobody took it seriously. 10 years later, Hitler rose to power.
So there's several directions that this could go right now. Yes. The 25th Amendment is being spoken about, which is the ability to remove a president and put the vice president into power. Pence has not actually come out and said anything. He has not indicated that he's even willing to consider it. There is the possibility of impeachment, and there's a possibility of waiting until after the election, and then what will happen with Biden. My question to you guys...
Okay. Well, my question regarding the 25th, because I'm assuming you're going to, I guess, start with that one.
Yeah.
The thing is, that one is the most appealing, but it's the least likely to succeed because it requires the president to go, yeah, okay, you guys found me incompetent, guess I'll step down. Literally, if you read, there's a flow chart going around that people oversimplified the process where the VP starts it, Congress confirms it, and then the president actually has to go, yeah, okay, I guess you guys are right, I have to step down. At any point, he can just basically nullify that whole process. Not to mention the fact that it requires a huge majority of the lawmakers, it's a 2/3 margin, which is huge. I don't think that they're going to have those numbers. And it takes, on top of those two things, the fact that it can be basically nullified at any point in the process, that it takes a large majority, it's going to take way more time than they have. Impeachment doesn't sound as appealing because it's not as vindictive sounding, but it's the most likely to succeed because it's the one that doesn't require the most bodies in agreement in terms of just sheer numbers. And in regards to what Leah was saying about, I guess Democratic leadership being on the left, I have absolutely no faith in them to do anything substantive. They've repeatedly shown that they normalize extremist behavior. We as a nation don't take punitive action against extremist behavior. We normalize it. After all the school shootings we've had, we don't pass any gun laws. Excuse me. We don't pass gun laws. We don't pass stricter background checks. We don't, eliminate loopholes for buying or possessing firearms for felons or people with domestic charges levied against them. We have school drills to prepare for shooters.
Yep.
We've normalized it. We don't care that an entire body of children was slaughtered. We just normalize school drills, that we don't do anything to combat the actual issue. So we've normalized this idea repeatedly. So I don't have any faith, honestly. I want them to impeach, but Nancy Pelosi is saying, oh yeah, if you guys don't start the 25th, we'll wait till next week to start impeachment.
It's performative.
Now. It is performative. And we've seen them performative. As a party, we saw them kneeling in the kente cloths last summer for the Black Lives Matter protests. And I'm like, if you really, really wanted substantial action, you would have took on the issue of police brutality. You would have taken on the white supremacists that have been infiltrating law enforcement for over a decade. But they just decided to put on some kente cloth and kneel in the Capitol as if that did anything. It's performative.
Yep. Virtue signaling.
Yeah, I mean, my fear would be, if it's left up to Pence and Pence comes into power as the president, would he just, and again it goes to Biden as well, will they or would they pardon Trump?
He wouldn't.
No, I don't
Even
think
if
so.
he had the power, he wouldn't.
I did want to comment really quickly. Alex Wright said something in the chat, and just for the sake of accurate information, he said Hitler was elected. That's not true. Hitler was appointed by Hindenburg in 1933. Hitler did not receive a single vote, and then wrote, I can't remember what the name of the Enabling Act of 1933, I think it was. Hitler passed it, which essentially gave him dictatorial power over the state of Germany.
Yes. Thank you for that. Because there has been, again, it's hard not to draw conclusions from history. So there has been a lot of talk over the last 2 days or 3 days whether or not Biden in particular will take the similar approach as what was done with Nixon. To calm the tensions. To calm the tensions, he will just pardon Trump and we'll all go back to normal. Whatever normal is these days.
And see, that I think that's the problem, is everybody just wants to go back to normal, not realizing that there is no going back. And I don't think that pardoning Trump is going to, like, you know, mend these tensions or anything. It's just going to further fuel them, because it's going to show, hey, look, we're not going to take action against actual literal fascists who have openly endorsed violence by their supporters and have encouraged their supporters to engage in actual violence against elected officials.
I also, again, it kind of ties back into the whole lack of faith in democratic leadership. Is last summer during the height of the protests, yeah, sure, Biden was out there meeting with like black leaders and, you know, kind of marching around a little bit. But he got up in front of a group of people in a church and goes, you know, we don't have to let our police shoot and kill. Why can't you just shoot him in the leg?
What?
This is Joe Biden's idea of dealing with a problem. Like, oh, don't shoot him in the chest or the head or the face. Why don't you just shoot him in the leg? To him, at that moment, not shooting someone just didn't occur to him. So, you know, him telling his wealthy donors at a fundraiser, nothing will fundamentally change. This is the kind of person I expect him to be. I don't expect any actual real reforms coming from him specifically. I don't believe that he believes that he's going to do anything. Like, he's really good at doing the performative act and, you know, getting up and being a speaker and, I guess, saying all the right words. But when it comes to actual tangible action, I don't believe he's capable of it. I don't believe he will do it. I mean, his track record in Congress already speaks for itself. He's already voted not to abolish the Electoral College before. He had that draconian-ass crime bill in the 90s. This guy has been slow to come around to a progressive idea. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. If anybody in the leadership hasn't been galvanized by this moment, it's really just never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Gunnelly says Biden was the perfect guy to beat Trump. Boring as hell.
I think the only reason that Biden won was because people were just that much opposed to Trump. People weren't voting for Biden. They were voting against Donald Trump.
Very much so.
And I'm certainly speaking for myself there as well, because I did vote for Joe Biden. And I did. After seeing what happened on Wednesday, I can only imagine where this country would be headed if Donald Trump had been reelected.
Yeah. I mean, I live in a place where I'm fortunate enough that I can vote third party and it not impact, you know, the state as a whole. I couldn't in good conscience vote for Joe. I couldn't do it. And I took a lot of heat in the months leading up to the election over that. But I get it. We live in an extremely gerrymandered system, and there are a lot of people who had serious conscientious objections to putting a positive vote in that ballot box for Joe Biden that just didn't have the ability in their system to do that because we're so big on voter suppression. We're big on gerrymandering. We don't want people's true voice to be heard. We put people in power and they stay there. That's what they want, the ultimate goal. They're not interested in actual substantial legislation. They just want to stay in power and make a butt ton of money. Kelly Loeffler.
Sorry, historical philosopher says this is why the Democrats will get crushed in 2024 because he won't change or address anything that will infuriate the voters. Problem is, there's no way back. There is no going back to what we perceive as normal. There is no, and as you said, Leo, why would you want to go back to that?
Why would you go back to normal when normal is what got us here?
Yeah, exactly. I don't see an ability for any leader, not just in the US, but any leader, to ignore either the dissent in the Capitol, or the Black Lives Matter protests, or anything that has happened in the last 10 years. It's just not possible, particularly with the new strain of the virus is coming out. They're going to need, and one thing that's interesting is when they talk about how democracy rules people. We rule by consent, and via a social contract, or what we perceive to be a social contract, unwritten rules as well as written rules. But we trust in our institutions, and Dr. Bob the Science Guy was talking about this on his stream yesterday. You have to believe in institutions in order for them to be able to rule.
Mm-hmm.
And the trust in the party system as it exists. And again, this is not just in the US. Have a look at the UK, have a look at Ireland, have a look at Germany and France. The same is true there. Hungary, which is leaning more towards the extreme right. Greece, which has taken a kind of swing to the right. There is no going back to normal.
Exactly. Might I address another comment in chat just for the sake of the audience? Because at least in reference to the United States, it's just not at all accurate. Irish Dublin Girl says there's no way there isn't a way back. Liberals have changed voting laws to their favor. I'm assuming she lives in Ireland. Maybe that's true there. That's 100. That's 100% not true in the United States. The Electoral College does not favor left-leaning candidates. It favors the Republican Party, as does the way that the Senate is currently structured. Most of the gerrymandered districts in the United States are actually gerrymandered to favor Republicans. Yeah, no, the left-leaning politics. And the other thing that needs to be pointed out is the Democratic Party is not a left-wing party. It's left of the Republican Party, but it isn't on the left. So even if the Democrats are winning, it's still not actual left-wing progressive candidates that are serving in the Democratic Party.
At best, you would get them to be centrists. And that is that's me stretching it.
That's absolute best case scenario.
Absolute best case scenario. And the Electoral College itself was strictly set up to enforce white hegemony.
Yep.
It literally was set up to disenfranchise the numerous, overwhelming population of Black voters or Black would-be voters. And it was done so in order to empower slave-owning states. This is why it exists. The number of people in your population determines how many electoral votes you get. Well, because Southern states largely owned slaves, they had more actual bodies in their population, so they got more votes. That is over-empowering a minority. Mm-hmm. And, again, we had a war over this and we're still doing it. Like, California is one of the most populous states in the union. We get our votes, tallied in and everyone's like, oh, you're such a blue state. It's a lot less blue than you think. But someone who is in a smaller state like, Kansas, Nebraska, Illinois, their population is a fraction of California's, but their Senate representation counts 30% more. And their House representation, you got a lot more people of one party or the other. But when it comes to the Senate, which is where the real stuff gets done, the minorities, like in terms of just the population and the voting blocks, that is what's been in power. We've seen Mitch McConnell cripple progressive initiatives time and time again. Yep. And it's not because he's coming from a big populous state like Texas. He lives in Kentucky. Kentucky! That has a teeny little fraction of the populace of places like Texas and Alaska. You know?
I'm going to object to that a little bit, because I mean a lot of countries in the world take their starting point from America and the electoral college vote. And here's why I'm going to kind of disagree with that a little bit. I haven't, to be honest with you, I haven't done as much research into the electoral college, but from what I know, the electoral college, as well as protecting or assuaging the South vote, it was to ensure that the high density populations would not simply elect the president. Now, there are questions over that, whether or not you rule by one person, one vote. But I know for here, we have a certain amount of people. I've lived down in West Cork for 8-9 years, and we only had 4 representatives in our parliament. We had 4. Dublin, which is where I live now, which is where I'm from, they have about 30-40 different voting areas, mainly because the population is so high. So what does it mean then for smaller states or for smaller populace, where you don't actually feel, and this again comes back to having faith in your institutions. If you feel like it doesn't matter what you vote, if you are in Louisiana, you do not have a high enough population to defeat somewhere like New York. So there is no point in voting. Now, I'm not saying that's the main reason to keep it, but that is what proponents of the Electoral College will say. You know,
right.
This is
what
the reason
proponents say, but that's just not really it's to me it's literally saying, well, we put the Electoral College in place because we don't really want a democracy. If 60% of the nation is voting, lives in say 10 states, and those 10 states end up being the ones that ultimately decide the president, there's nothing wrong with that. That's 60% of the population of the country. That's how democracy is supposed to work. If you're in the minority, that doesn't mean that we give you a little bit more power. That means that obviously your ideas aren't popular. Sorry.
Yeah, and another thing, it's very disingenuous to look at a map and assume that that represents the voting populace of America, because land does not vote. Mm-hmm. There are massive thousands and thousands of acres of land in, sparsely populated states that are covered by mountains, farmland, or desert. So you have a state like Kansas, there's nothing there but like cornfields, and people are like, well, there's only a tiny population. Should they have no voice in the government? They do have a voice, but it's literally to the point where, like, the way American democracy is set up is that a bill or a law or whatever starts in the House, and if it gets to the Senate, they vote. And at first that sounds like, yeah, perfect. You're going through the confirmation steps, you're making sure that things don't get rammed through. But what's been happening is no matter what gets past the House, it doesn't even get into a vote in the Senate. Mitch McConnell will leave shit on his desk and won't even bring it up to be voted on. So no matter what the majority of a populace in the nation votes or what their electoral representatives propose, if the Senate, the guy in charge of the Senate doesn't want to vote on it, he just doesn't bring it in.
Yeah,
that's not the way that you have a representative democracy. Exactly. Like, it's not his job or any one single person's job to decide, well, you know what, I don't like this legislation, or I don't think it's important, so we're just not going to vote on it. That's not your job. Your job is to take the
perversion of
law.
our institutions.
Yeah, you are to present it to be voted on, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's relevant or not, because it got there for a reason.
Yeah.
And we have like these instances of like single people holding certain places hostage in government. There's no checks or balances there. Like it started out like really like, oh great, this looks amazing on paper. Like, you know, you won't have the judges doing everything. You won't have the president doing everything. You won't have the Congress doing everything. But dude, we're past that point now.
Exactly.
So
and really quickly, there was another point that I wanted to make about the Electoral College.
Yeah.
5 times in the past, the Electoral College is the reason that the candidate that got the least amount of votes won. By definition, that is anti-democratic. Like just definitionally, that is anti-democratic.
And I would like to note that in the, I believe it's 1970s when one of the votes came up, because this comes up from time to time, like should America abolish the Electoral College? The Senate was having a disagreement on it. And this is one of the times where Joe Biden said, no, don't get rid of it. The discussion at the time was, yeah, people just want to get rid of it because they think, you know, a minority of voters will actually end up winning the Electoral College and putting their minority candidate into office. That won't happen. It's only happened once before. And so they went, yeah, we're not going to get rid of it. And I'm looking at the last few elections, just kind of staring into the camera, metaphorically, because that's exactly what's been happening.
Yes.
People who don't win the popular vote end up winning the Electoral College. So the majority of Americans, sometimes by margins of millions of votes, didn't want that to occur.
So there is
2016.
There is a big discussion going on in the chat at the moment, and it needs to be addressed.
What are they talking about? I've only been looking here and there.
That's fine. There are some in the chat, 1 or 2 in the chat, that are saying that the election was fraudulent. And that are repeating the idea that the Republicans, the Republican observers, have been kicked out of observing the
Factually untrue.
I know. I'm going to get to that. My response to that: these people, and when I say these people, I mean the Trump team, not just the Trump supporters, the Trump team.
The Trump regime. That's what it is. I'm sorry. It's the Trump regime.
The Trump, well, I'm going to say Trump team. The Trump team have had, and the reason being is because I'm talking about the legal team. I'm not talking about the regime. I'm talking about the legal team.
Yeah.
The Trump team had several instances where they had the ability to yes, it is one of my mods, and that's okay. I don't agree with Irish Dublin Girl for what she is saying, but this is important, and that's not the reason why she's a mod, but she is a mod. The point of it is that the Trump team have had infinite amounts of attempts or possibilities where they could show with evidence, and this is the important thing. If you're going to make an accusation as serious as voter fraud, if you are going to make an accusation as serious as attacks on the democracy that you are sworn to uphold, then you need very realistic evidence. Evidence as in video footage. Evidence as I saw, I heard, I witnessed, not I believe. In every single court case that they went into, and this is important, Irish Dublin Girl, for people to understand, and I thank you for actually raising it, because although I disagree with you, it's important to be raised. They had the opportunity to go to the courts, to show the evidence. They didn't have the evidence. So the problem with it is, when you come on and you say, well, you know, Democrats lied, Democrats threw out, first of all, it wasn't the Democrats that would have had the ability to throw out Republican observers. It was the mayors or the official officers. It's not even the mayor. It's not even the secretaries of state have that power. It was the officials within, the unelected officials, I might add, but it was the officials within the count centers. And the officials within the count centers are not partisan people. They are not part of any political party. They are there as representatives of the state, not as party political representatives. And that's important to actually discuss, because ordinary Democrats, whether it was in a Democratic state or a Republican state, you also had people saying Republicans threw out Republicans because they were in charge of the state. There was no proof. And if you can bring me proof, then I will say, yes, go ahead, continue to spread what you believe. They literally had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 attempts at different.
Oh, honey, it was in the 30s, 40s.
Oh, was it 30s?
There's been
50s.
60 high-profile court cases. There's been a lot of like lower level, but they just aren't even relevant. 60 of them. The Trump administration lost 2 of them, or 59 of them. 2 of them went to the Supreme Court,
And the
which
Supreme Court.
swiftly rejected them. Not a single governor, not a single Secretary of State, none of the elections commissioners, none of these judges. Almost all of them were handpicked by Donald Trump, and
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell have said, yeah, we've got fraud. None of them. There is
And
no evidence.
the ruling by a lot of these courts, if you read the summary judgments and all of that, they say dismissed with prejudice. There was no evidence shown.
Wasn't it the
That's why you
case?
do it. You put it in a court of law. They showed no evidence, and the judges went dismissed with prejudice. You've got less than nothing.
Wasn't it the case that most of the court cases that they actually took while talking about widespread voter fraud didn't even include voter fraud on their in their cases?
Yeah, I believe
And
so.
another thing is saying like, oh, votes were thrown out or observers weren't allowed to observe. That's factually untrue. We literally had a live stream of the Philadelphia voter count
Most
going on.
did.
People unpacking the votes, laying them out, counting them, recounting them. At that point, people are allowed to challenge a ballot. That wasn't happening. We watched it live streamed. So, you know, this idea.
Most states had it. Most states had a
Oh,
live stream.
Well, they threw them out or they didn't allow us to do. That's simply not true. It is fantastical just thinking. It is an alternate reality. This did not happen.
One thing I do want to address with both of you and get your opinions on is this idea that when we heard Biden come out, and Biden came out very swiftly, very harshly, called it an insurrection, called it a lot of things. But one of the things that I do have issue with is when he says this is not America. This is not what America is.
Where's
Sorry,
Joe
this is my
Biden been
answer.
the last 10 years?
So,
Where's Joe Biden in the last 60 years?
where has Joe Biden been for the last 250 years?
Yeah.
Because this is America. This and God love her, my niece is a huge fan of Hamilton at the moment. She just watches it all the time, and it's amazing because this is the year that Hamilton came out on Disney Plus. So it's literally widespread available, where you can see in some of the discussions that they're having, and again, it's heavily influenced. Obviously, it's not factual or entirely factual. They were having these discussions at the Forum of the Nation. Before the formation of the
There's
nation.
been a lot of discourse going around this week about like, oh, this country's 250 years old and we're like, no, actually, if you want to go by one person, one vote, it's only been about 55 years that America's had anything resembling an actual democracy.
Yes,
And
I agree
when
with
you
that.
think about
wholeheartedly.
it that way, that it's only been, 5 decades. Wow.
But I do have to laugh. And I know this is terrible. I do have to laugh when people say this is not America.
Oh, you heard
Of
me
course
laughing.
it's
I
America.
was like,
Of
we've been doing
course.
this since we got here.
I mean, we went to war with each other over practically the same shit, but tell me about how this isn't America.
Right? Literally, women and non-wealthy white landowners couldn't vote when we started the country, and yet we wrote, "Oh, men are created equal." Yeah, okay.
There's
Literally slaughtering indigenous populations and kicking them out of their homeland so we could live there and farm. But yeah, go off.
And the one thing I want to point out, because I think it's important to point out, is you had these Europeans come over here and just start slaughtering people and relocating them. People that have been living here for, in some cases, in upwards of 20, 20,000 years. And I want everybody to just think about that for a second. 20,000 years. And these people just came, slaughtered them, forced them off their land, said all men are created equal, and then subjugated black people and women and non-Protestant Christians
all over the place.
Yep.
I think it's remarkable, and it's important to actually state, if this is an American, if this is un-American, well, there is another thing that I do want to touch upon, which was mentioned earlier. If this isn't Americans, who are they?
Right. We've invaded countries for doing less than this.
Very fucking true.
Like, did you see the Onion article that's been going viral again? That's Serbian peacekeepers sent to the United States. I was like,
yes.
Please roast us. We deserve it.
Arwa Damon actually said, and she talks about how some of the language, particularly around calling it an insurrection, and it's not even just calling it an insurrection. It's comparing it with third world countries. Is understating the fact that Trump didn't create the monster that we have in front of us. He didn't create the people who took over the Capitol building yesterday. He just unveiled it again.
Trump was not the problem. Trump is a symptom of the problem that's been brewing in this country since its inception.
Yes.
Absolutely.
He's not.
And
he's
that
not
is that
the
there is a small group of people, but they're so scared of change. They're so scared of progressivism that they're extremely vocal. And they have utilized the electoral and the social power that they have and have always traditionally held to suppress anybody that threatens them. And that has come to fruition in somebody like Donald Trump. That's why the vast majority of his support, that's why the vast majority of Donald Trump's support, and this is just a statistical fact, anybody can go look it up, are non-college educated white men.
And here's another one that liberals are going to fucking hate me for. They're not poor. The people that stormed the Capitol
look at the
building,
Trump trains with their 2017 F-150s that cost $60,000 and their, $70,000 SUVs. These are not poor people.
These are not poor people that had fucking cruises and yachts with their Trump flags. They are not poor. They're not like, oh, we're so economically anxious and suppressed. No, you have people that could afford to just fly over across the country to Washington, D.C., take time off of work, spend time in the Hyatt Regency. Having stayed in the Hyatt, it's expensive. These are not just, country bumpkins. They have wealth. They don't want other people to have the same wealth.
Exactly.
I love Ivy Gentry says, I want to progress to Star Trek, please.
Same.
Let's get there. Let's get there.
I can give you guys a hot take.
Idic with the infinite diversity and infinite combinations, like that Vulcan mantra is so critical to Star Trek, and I love it, and I really, really wish we would get there.
Yeah. Bring the United States to socialism. I'll be happy. There's my hot take for the day.
Seconded.
Am I the only reformist on this panel?
I don't know. I'll just tell you right now, I'm an anarcho-syndicalist and a libertarian socialist, so yeah.
I'm just a straight up socialist, like straight up.
Yeah, I am comparable to people like Vosh, Hakeem a little bit. Hakeem's a little bit more revolutionary than I would be, but I'm really, really similar to somebody like Vosh, who is also an anarcho-syndicalist.
I think my politics may or may not always line up perfectly with the textbook definition of socialism, but I guess to summarize mine is that we, as a group of people, we live in a society, have a moral obligation to take care of one another, and we need to do that using our structured government. If we have one.
I want to go back to
it's a welfare state. Yeah, well, people are starving, so you can just look at them and let them starve, or you can fucking feed them. So
I want to go back to something that Vishanti said there earlier. That I think it was Vishanti that said it. Having the Confederate flag, flying that Confederate flag inside the Capitol building, that was not all. And it's important to actually say the difference between democracy or even insurrection in some ways. Insurrection is, and this is why I don't think it's insurrection. This is why I reject the notion that it's insurrection. Insurrection is about a cause. This was about personality. And the reason I say that is because not only did they fly the Confederate flag inside that building, which is a remarkably bleak scene to see.
Enemy flag. That's a literal enemy nation's flag.
Yes.
But what actually hurts is that they, as patriots, they always proclaim that they're patriots.
They're not
as patriots, I know, but as patriots, they took down the American flag.
God damn it! You were gonna take what I was gonna say.
They
Yes.
took down
And this
the
is
American
why.
flag and they put up the Trump flag.
Yes, this is why I call it an insurrection. They took down the flag of their country, the one that they claimed everybody's got to stand for, and they took it down and replaced it with the flag, which I would say now is the American equivalent of the swastika. It represents a fascist white supremacist movement, and they used that flag to replace the flag of this nation.
Yeah, and I also want to speak to the notion of insurrection. Like, it is about a cause. It's about a cause of white supremacy. It's about a cause of disenfranchising non-white voters and non-white voices. And when they talk about like, oh, well, we want lawful votes to be counted. We want legally cast votes to be counted.
White votes.
That's, yeah, it's code. It's code for we're trying as hard as we can to suppress votes that we don't like. Yep. So that they're made not legal, so we don't have to count them. Like, yep. When the there's
black votes, the leftist votes, yep.
When you're seeing lines of people trying to vote that go on for 12 hours, that's voter suppression. When you see people go, oh, you can't vote by mail, you have to vote in person because, you know, what if you're dead? That's voter suppression. During a pandemic, voting by mail was the safest and only logical freaking thing to do. And we saw states going, no, you can't vote by mail. We've been doing it for years for people that are in the military overseas, but you can't do it. That's voter suppression. And there's some lawyers that I follow on Twitter and some scholars, and you know, a lot of people are like, this is insurrection, it's sedition. Yeah, it sounds reactionary, but there's legal precedent for this. Yeah. People saying it's not just sedition, it's insurrection because it's both actually. To quote T. Greg Doucette on Twitter, he's a lawyer. In this case, it's both. The act of storming the Capitol is conduct that has the effect of inciting compatriots to follow along, hence it's sedition. It's also a violent attack on lawful authority, so it's also insurrection. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. Code regarding seditious conspiracy and insurrection explicitly, this is a U.S. Code 18, Section 2384. If two or more persons in any state or territory, or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the U.S., or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they will be fined under this title of seditious conspiracy and imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. So they did that. They literally did that. Yes. They used force. They opposed, not just opposed, because you can oppose it, whatever. They opposed it by force, the authority of the Congress to count lawful votes. They opposed by force, seized, and possessed the property of the Capitol.
And the worst part about all of this was spearheaded by the President of the United States.
I'm going to get to that in a minute. I want to pull this up and get your opinions because this is where I'd kind of see myself. This is the Irish Times article there today. It says, but in truth, Wednesday's events were less a conscious attempt to seize power or an attempted coup, as many commentators characterize it. It was more of a stumbling, rolling riot turned vandalism spree. This was the dying convulsion of a regime that's on its way out, not an insurrectionary expression of a popular movement. And this is where I would disagree with the idea of insurrection.
I agree with what you said there, but the reason why, and I'm reading this, I agree with this 100%. That this was these people. Trump is not popular, this Trumpist movement, because I call it Trumpism, because it is literally, it's an ideology surrounding fascism and white supremacy and ethno-statism. It's not popular. These people, they were organized, but not very well. But in my opinion, I don't think that removes the fact that this was violent. It was violent force to overthrow the authority, the democratically elected authority of the United States government, which is what insurrection is by definition. So
yeah,
I
and
see
using force to oppose either the laws, the enforcement of the laws, or the authority, or to seize the property by force. That's literally what they did. The photo that's been going around of that guy in the Capitol building where he's got his sidearm and a handful of zip ties.
zip tie cuffs. Those were zip tie cuffs.
Zip tie cuffs. Those motherfuckers were going to take hostages. We literally saw the posts on Parler and like 8kun that were explicit in taking hostages, in executing lawmakers. They even were trying to come for Pence, who, you know, ostensibly was on their side like a month ago. And that is the textbook, literally, I just read it in the law, definition of like seditious conspiracy. And when people are talking about like, oh, it's a coup, it's not a coup, just because it was a stupid coup doesn't mean it wasn't a coup.
I do want to
don't agree with that. Hang on. I don't.
Well, what I was going to say, Keila, is because they don't have power or it's about taking power, they believe they already have it. That's the whole thrust of their argument is like, well, you didn't actually win. We're still in power. He's still going to be president. They believe they already have it.
You see, I don't agree with. I think it's giving them too much
credence.
Too much credence.
That's
exactly.
what I was going to say. Is that
right.
I think Keela's coming from the point of calling it an insurrection is sort of giving them more credence that they were engaged in something more than what it really was. And I can sort of agree with that. But
planned it doesn't mean
here's where I stand. Here's where I stand. All right. I have seen insurrection. I have been in Palestine for months watching fighting. I was there when insurrection was happening, literally fights on the streets, armed on both sides. I've seen it. I've been in Lebanon. I have been in areas of extreme violence. I have been in refugee camps when a militia comes in, murders people for no reason. I've been there. Okay, so for me, looking at the idea of insurrection reminds me of Syria and the popular revolt against Bashar al-Assad, which should have fucking won in my view. But that's what I think about armed insurrection. What happened? Hang on. What happened on Wednesday? A group of people went to a large group of people, but a group of people went to the Capitol building, broke through piss poor security attempts to protect the people inside that building. I do believe the decision to step down as the Capitol Police chief was absolutely not just correct but necessary.
Yep.
But this was a group of people that went inside the building violently, of course, but they had no idea what they were doing as soon as they were inside. So the idea of calling it an insurrection when these guys were like, hey, we've made it past the barricades. What next? What next? What next? What next? Hey, we've made it inside the building. What next? What next? What next? They didn't have a clue what they were doing. So it's giving them too much credit, in my view.
Just because it was a stupid attempt or a clunky attempt doesn't make it not an attempt.
Yes,
and
the factor
we
of
know that largely they're bumpkins in terms of how they execute whatever they're doing. We know that they're clumsy, just dudes. But their intent was insurrection. Their intent was to cause violence. Their intent was to overthrow, prevent, or in some cases reverse lawfully set up institutions and procedures. And yeah, I mean, obviously there are extreme examples like this. There are, you've got lived experience dealing on the ground with like militant insurrections that actually do succeed or are very damn close. But America, as we all know, is behind the curve on a lot of things. Just because they bungled it doesn't make it not an insurrection.
Yes, I call it an insurrection. What I would say is this is an insurrection because of the intent. This isn't not an insurrection because of incompetence. And while this isn't like an insurrection that we've seen in many other places, which I would argue was significantly more organized and violent than this, I wouldn't, in my opinion, I wouldn't state that that takes away from the intent of this. So I do understand where Keela is coming from. And to an extent, I can agree. You know, calling it an insurrection is stating that they were way more organized than what they really were. But for me, the insurrection is the intent, that it was violent. They were intending on essentially overthrowing the United States government.
Like, they set up a gallows with a noose outside the Capitol building. That's insurrection. You're literally putting up a display of, this is what we're going to do to you. There's literally, just because they didn't manage to drag anyone out because they'd all been whisked away to safety doesn't make it not a clear intent. And like, I'm reading posts right now from Parler where they're saying, fuck these DC police, fuck those cocksuckers up, beat them down. You don't get to return to your families tonight. Oath breakers deserve punishment. Another person said, kill all Democrats and rhinos. Another person said, to all liberals, this isn't a video game. There's many, many vets out there that are going to enjoy blowing your brains out. Many of us can't wait. Just thought you'd like to know that. Clear intent. Absolute clear intent. Not people showing up to demonstrate outside, which they can do even if we don't like it. People advocating violence, clearly expressing their intent for violence. There was no question about it. And yeah, again, they're clumsy and they bungled it. But
Blue Marble Science says, when it's Black Lives Matter, the media calls it a protest. But so for some reason, we're attaching terms like coup to this pathetic mess. All they did was interrupt the formality.
Violently, with the intent of killing lawmakers.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with Blue. Yes, it was a pathetic mess, and I don't believe attempted coup even comes close to what we actually saw. But it was an important formality. That's why people are so upset. It was the intent behind shutting that, not only shutting down the discussions and that formality, it was about overturning it. Yeah. And that's what makes a difference. That's Blue, what's important. And Blue, there is a link in your Discord in private messages if you want to come in, Blue, because I would love to get your opinion on this. And it's not to sow division, it's not to create arguments, but we do need a range of different perspectives as well.
This is what we were kind of talking about earlier, when we talked about how America normalizes violent behavior and extremism. If you look at what happened, where people were physically armed, they had handcuff zip ties. Okay, let me go back to the fact that they were armed. Okay, they were breaking down windows and had zip ties in their hands ready to take hostages. That's not all they did was interrupt. They did it by violence and they did it by force, okay? When you want to interrupt a law or a lawmaker session, you don't storm their building, break in the windows, break down doors, carve graffiti into the building, beat down guards, and then go steal shit from an office and go, well, they're just interrupting. Look at those crazy goons go, hee hee. That's not just that's all they did. They did it with violence. They did it by force. That was clear intent. Do not normalize this. This is not normal. This is not rational behavior. This is not acceptable behavior from anyone, ever.
So how is it a gross overreaction to say that they were attempting to kill lawmakers when they literally said that's what they wanted to do? Like, that's not my words. They said that. They brought the equipment with them to do it.
I do want, and I know there's going to be a few that's going to be upset with me for showing this, but I want to show something really quickly. I'm going to share the audio. Sorry, my brain works in a weird way. I want to show this because it's important to the rationale behind masterminds, the masterminds that stormed the Capitol.
Ma'am, what happened to you?
I got maced.
You got maced? Please.
And what happened? You were trying to go inside the
Yeah,
Capitol?
I made it like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
And she's rubbing an onion on her eyes.
I can't believe they maced me for breaking onto federal property. And here's the thing about the onion. People were saying, oh, she's faking it. She didn't get maced. I think actually what's going on there, and this is something from one of the people who were at the Charlottesville, incidents, is that onions, there's like this folk legend or rumor going around that like, well, if you put onions close to your eye, it'll help you cry out the chemicals. Guys, your eyeballs are not for doing chemistry. Use water and flush out your eyes.
Yes.
Oh, the reason why I bring her up is this is the apparent genius that stormed the Capitol. I mean, I understand that we can't allow this to be normalized. Absolutely, completely agree. And again, I would like to talk about the holy lack of security on that building. But the idea that these are the people
well,
who are taking over the Capitol.
Sorry. Another thing in that video, what you're watching is her complete, just baffled reaction to there being any consequences whatsoever to her actions. This is a shared mindset. They were breaking in and taking selfies and high-fiving people, and then at the smallest display of force or resistance, they start getting upset. And she was just like, I can't believe they maced me. And they were like, well, why? But I broke into the Capitol. They don't expect consequences because we don't give them consequences.
I think that's one of the main things.
I need to find the tweet where this lady was being interviewed outside, and she goes, well, they're not supposed to be shooting at us. They're supposed to be shooting at Black Lives Matter, not us. And I'm like, oh, you said the quiet part out loud, did you?
Yeah. I watched the video. I'm not going to show it, but I watched the video of the woman getting shot. What's her name? Sorry. Her name is Ashley Babbitt. And first of all, before I even talk about Ashley Babbitt again, before I do, absolute commiserations to her family. Her life didn't have to end that day. It is an absolute travesty that it did.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I mean, that's really all I can say about it. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Sad, yes, but
due to her actions, due to the actions of her friends in the white supremacy movement, and let's be honest, she was part of the Women for America First. She has commented on it in the lead up to this. She was a white supremacist. Doesn't mean that I am happy she is dead. No. I think it's a very sad day that she lost her life. And I do want to send condolences to her family because that it shouldn't have happened. But the reason what happened was because she was literally banging on the glass of the chamber door.
Yes.
That's where she was shot.
I don't think she deserved to die.
No. But
she didn't deserve to die, but there are consequences for the actions that you take.
Yeah.
I'm sharing my screen right now to kind of show evidence of the, explicit calls for violence. This wasn't, oh, they just interrupted a session of Congress just like any other session of Congress. This one was no different than any of the others. Nope. Like, guys, take your head out of your butt, please.
Yeah.
Stop ignoring what's going on.
Yeah, I think with a lot of people, I think it's that they're scared to admit what actually happened and how violent these people are willing to get. They want to believe that this wasn't as big of a deal as it was. And I don't think it was like a huge major deal, like democracy is crumbling in America. But I do think that this is significant and it needs to be taken seriously. And I think that these people are just afraid to admit the significance of this, in my opinion.
Well, it's going to be uncomfortable to admit that you have any kind of complicity or tacit allowance of this kind of thing to fester. Like, you saw the lawmakers that kind of came out in the last 24 to 48 hours, like Republican lawmakers going, we don't agree with this violence, and they're just acting completely shocked when they were perfectly fine with taking these people's votes and taking their money and, you know, speaking at their rallies, and then all of a sudden it gets violent, which is what they've been saying they're going to do. They're like, oh, I can't believe that you would act so uncouth.
Yeah. Exactly.
I want to clarify. She climbed through the glass. She climbed through the window, I think, or she might have gone.
And
She didn't get through the doors of the chamber itself. That was before they actually made it through into the chambers. And the way in which they got into the Senate chambers was actually through the second and third floor galleries. So this was on the ground floor. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. I do want to talk about consequences that you brought up. Consequences. First of all, I want to go through some of the quotes, the infamous quotes that led us to this situation. And you know what I'm going to do right now. It's time for Donald Trump quotes.
Ugh, I'm going to go get some coffee while you're reading those. I need some more.
By all means, I think we all need some coffee. So I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. I don't care. That was said at a rally. On discussions of 9/11 from New Jersey, apparently there was a heavy Arab population that were cheering as the buildings came down. In relation to terrorists, you have to take out their families. We can't worry about being politically incorrect and politically correct. That's what he said. In relation to John McCain, he's a war hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured. In relation to Charlottesville, there were very fine people on both sides. In relation to his relationship to black people, I have a great relationship with the blacks. In the Strip View interview, he says, "You wouldn't have your job if you weren't so beautiful." On torture, I would bring back waterboarding, and I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding. In terms of and this is what I want to leave people with in terms of the Trump quotes. There are so many. Oh, there are so many. He said the buck stops with everybody, and this comes back to this comes around to his reaction to the rioters. He said at one point, "I love you, we love you, but go home." After this big, huge bullshit of how the election was stolen, after the election was stolen. And again, I'm going to share this, I'm going to show this because it's important. This is what he said in the run-up to the riots on the Capitol. You'll never take back your country with weakness. You have to show strength, and we have to be strong. He said this, and he also said that we note that Donald Trump was not on that protest. We are going to march on the Capitol, he said, to give courage. We have to give courage to weak Republicans. That's what he said. That is exactly the words he used. We have to give courage to weak Republicans. Now, that is terrifying. The reason why it is terrifying is because it is legitimizing whatever comes next.
Yep.
And that is why there has to be consequences to the Trump administration, not just Donald Trump, but Donald Trump has to face consequences. But Rudy Giuliani.
Oh,
Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz.
Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. Holy shit.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said something about Hitler was made some statement about Hitler being right on at the rally before they started storming the Capitol.
Before the rally, hang on. The rally at the rally, Rudy Giuliani said, "Let's have trial by combat."
Yep.
If that's not inciting a riot, I don't know what is. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna excuse me while I Jewish rage for a minute. getting up in front of the Capitol building on the day that they're counting lawful votes and saying, yeah, Hitler was right. If you have the youth, you have America. Bitch, Whitney Houston said the same thing, and you're not quoting her.
Says everything you need to know.
This is everything you need to know about her, but also I'm going to share this nice little ditty. Let's see. Go Chrome tab. Boop. I would like for someone to look at this picture and tell me all of the things that are wrong with it. Take all the time you need.
Everything.
How about that Camp Auschwitz shirt? How about that? When a Jewish person looks at that shirt, we see violence. That's a threat. That is a promise to commit violence. Okay? The little caption underneath it said work makes freedom. This person is a threat. If you allow him to get off without any consequences, he's going to escalate. That's what they do. These people are like, look, we broke off a piece of the, Capitol where it said Nancy Pelosi's the Speaker of the House. Look at us. We're taking selfies. We're so excited. Oh my gosh, look what we did. Ha ha.
I think that's the most remarkable thing about it. There was a political commentator on CNN, and they said, I don't know what that's like to be able to take that action and not have to hide. That sent chills.
Whiteness. It's because they don't anticipate consequences. Do you think a black person would get within 30 yards of the Capitol building with that shit? Hell no. Like, what was the young lady's name who was trying to make a U-turn out of the street from in front of the Capitol? She accidentally hit a barrier when she was trying to back up, and they shot her.
Oh yeah, I heard about. Yep, I remember that.
And these guys are just allowed to, walk in and do all this shit and steal a podium and break shit off an office and steal a laptop and
steal
do
mail.
all this
Yeah.
Steal mail.
And then take
it's fine.
pictures of what's in the mail and what's on the laptop with their phones, the same thing that they accused Hillary Clinton of doing for all intents and purposes. But you know what? When white conservatives do it, it's okay. If anybody else does it, we should line them up against the wall and fucking shoot them.
Well, it's fine when white conservatives do it because, they're just expressing their displeasure and they're exercising their right to protest and they're just making their grievances heard. Mm-hmm. That the whole laptop getting stolen thing, that's an info security nightmare. That is a literal fucking nightmare. Any spy that was worth their salt would have been there cosplaying a MAGA person just so they could break in and do that. You guys, this is this is a nightmare scenario. If you steal a laptop from a government federal building, dude, that to me.
Chris Witt says, Chris Witt says exactly. Trump has been grooming these thugs for over 4 years. He has been dog whistling and either directly or indirectly priming his base, especially the different groups. That's why it's an insurrection. Mm-hmm. Interesting point.
Yeah, and when he said Proud Boys stand back and stand by, what the hell do you think he meant? He didn't tell him to stand down. He said stand by, which means just wait. Just wait. He was priming the chamber.
Again, consequences. Matt Getz repeating a fake story about face recognition, discovering Antifa in the crowd. What's your response to that, Vishanti? I'm dying to hear this.
Well, obviously, this was right before they came out showing that people had literally peed and spread their literal feces in the Capitol building. So if you want fecal recognition is more accurate to what's going to happen to these people. I laughed because he was like, "Oh, the facial recognition picked up these people and they're anti-fascists." And I laughed because the only reason it came up under those websites is because the anti-fascists are the ones documenting the white supremacists. And if you trim out those guys' faces, they're not secret agents. They're literal out in the open white supremacists, like the Q shaman. That guy's not an anti-fascist actor. He's literally a Q guy who wears a buffalo head.
Yeah, that guy was just...
Oh, what an idiot.
The QAnon shaman, I think is what people were calling it.
Mm-hmm.
Trump said from day one that he wouldn't accept the results. He did. So that's why
He pretty much said if I lose an election, automatically it's fraudulent.
So, and someone said earlier, I can't remember who said it earlier, but someone said it earlier. It's like, why? This is what's remarkable about it's the selective outrage, folks at it again, right? So, Trump lost the election, but he didn't lose the election because it was fraudulent. Well, then how are some of the senators that are sitting in that building who were elected at the same time as Trump sitting in that building? Why wasn't their vote rigged?
Don't try to apply logic to it.
It was literally the same sheet. It was like there's a little booklet that you filled out. It was literally the same vote. It was the same people counting. So why are their ballots valid and President Trump's aren't? Or President Biden now in a few days.
Don't try to make it make sense.
Yeah, we wanted Biden to win, but yeah, let's keep Mitch McConnell in. That makes sense.
Hang on, I got a quote for y'all. Trump didn't just tell us that he was doing this. Here's a quote from a book that Sarah Kendzior wrote called Hiding in Plain Sight. She's been calling this for years. She's quoting Trump in February 2014, who goes on Fox News to defend Russia. Fucking imagine it. Why a reality TV host was on Fox News defending Russia is its own story, but here's what he said about his desired outcome for the U.S. Okay, February 2014. Quote, you know what solves it? When the economy crashes, check, when the country goes to total hell and everything is a disaster, then you'll have you'll have riots to go back to where we used to be when we were great.
Yikes.
And by great, they mean when, there was whiter.
Yeah. Dude whose dad was in the actual KKK,
Yeah.
That part.
That's quite scary.
And
but
yeah,
again, this
felons on TV going, who could have seen this coming?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. The idea that nobody saw this coming. Everyone has been saying this is coming for weeks. I remember 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I put up a comment. Actually, let me pull it up here. Because 2 weeks ago, I pulled up a comment. I put a comment up on my community post. Hang on for a second. And if I can find it now. There we go. I'm going to read out this comment that I made 2 weeks ago. 2 freaking weeks ago. Is the US heading towards a civil war or a revolution? What does Trumpism mean for the divisions in America? I will be investigating this in the new year. And one of the comments that was put up about 10 minutes after I put up the post from Edward Navarez said, on January 6th, Trump calls for a big protest in Washington, D.C. That's the same day that the Senate will meet to count and certify the electoral votes. Now, if Edward Navarez, hello, Edward Navarez, if you're watching, could see this coming and post it on my community tab, how the hell did security forces not see it coming? And the fact of the matter is, in my view, the reason they didn't see it coming is because they didn't want to believe that wealthy white folks could be capable of such heinous acts.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fact of it. Now, you could argue, as Vishanti argued earlier, they were taking pictures, selfies with the rioters. They were in, some of them, and I know some of them, was in support of what had happened. And hopefully their heads will roll, and not literally, I mean figuratively, they'll get the sack or they'll get jail time for allowing this situation to happen. I disagree with the idea that the head of the police, the Capitol Police, is allowed to walk away with just a resignation.
Hold on, I got something for you. Talk amongst yourselves while I screen share.
I don't agree that he's allowed to walk away with just the slap in the hand.
December 27th.
And even in the run-up to it, the Proud Boys were saying this is not to be missed. Explosions are going to come to the Capitol. They literally said it on all of these public platforms.
Yeah. I could have possibly seen it coming.
The right wing have always blamed the left when they engage in violent action. They never take responsibility for their actions. I think it's actually deeper than that, because I was watching Tucker Carlson during the riots, where, and I don't recommend it because Tucker Carlson is annoying as fuck. But Tucker Carlson was justifying, once again, like Charlottesville, justifying egregious acts towards democracy. And not only was he justifying it, he was saying it in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement needing to be muzzled, basically. That's the balls of that. The gumption to be able to go on national TV and say, yes, the people in Antifa, let's say, or the Black Lives Matter should be muzzled and should be held accountable for all of their faults. But these people are very fine people. And they're just misunderstood, and they're just angry, and they're just this, and they're just that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The fact is, they broke the law by entering that building violently. They broke the law, Tucker Carlson. I know you're not going to watch this, but fuck it. And this is what's important, okay? This is what's important in this conversation. We do need to address. Well, I say we. I'm in Ireland. I don't give a fuck. I can't do fuck all. But we do need, and there's another. We do need to address the reasons behind these groups gaining credence. This is what my channel is all about. Looking at conspiracy theories, why they are so powerful, why they are gaining credence. And it doesn't help that this fool is allowed to go on national television as the leader of the so-called free world and validate it and justify it and incite it and then walk away scot-free. And it's the same with the Met Police or with the Capitol Police. Why is it that the leader of the Capitol Police is not in prison right now for allowing this to happen, for not taking the steps necessary that they saw necessary with the Black Lives Matter protests and other peace protests in the Capitol? They knew they were a football field away. Why they could not see this coming, I don't understand.
First of all, Donald Trump, be there, be wild. Just right there telling him. Second of all, as a poet once said, some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses.
Yep.
People don't ask where Miley Cyrus is when Hannah Montana's on stage, y'all. Asking like, well, where were the cops? Dude, they were... Y'all, really?
That's Aaron. Really? That's Aaron. I'm going to be honest. As Aaron said, you should give a fuck because US politics do affect Europe. When I say I don't give a fuck, of course I give a fuck. That's why I'm running the live stream, in fairness. I do, because, I do understand. And again, Vishanti is going to share something. This is why I needed you here. Here we go.
Like I said, I got receipts. So the Proud Boys, who were extremely, Blue Lives Matter, extremely embarrassing to spend months mocking Antifa and licking cop boot, only to go out there and get absolutely rinsed by cops who were barely even trying. Weak stuff. Those teenage commies managed to take on and beat whole armies of cops and Proud Boys, and they're all skinny whip soy boy betas. But we got scrubbed like it was nothing, and all for the sake of some rich orange pedophile who doesn't give a shit about any of us. Sad.
So do they not know that leftists are always the tougher ones? I mean, come on now.
No, they're skinny jean wearing soy boys. We're the real men.
I was trying to explain all of this to my niece earlier. My niece is 9. She's very politically aware, weirdly enough. And again, I do think it's partially because of the school that she's in, because they've been teaching them a lot about not just politics. Finally, they're actually teaching them something about civil society. But one of the things that I was trying to get round to, and I couldn't answer it because there's so many questions that are up in the air at the moment. Where does this leave the US? How? And I'm realizing that we've been going for almost 2 hours. What steps need to be taken to take the toxic element? First of all, I do think prosecutions to every single asshole that was inside that building needs to happen. So good luck with that. I do think Trump and his minions who incited this bullshit all need to be jailed. But where do you see America going? How? Because this doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I will be looking at the social contract. My first video I was hoping to get out this week. It might not be until next week. But this idea of the social contract is breaking down. Not just in the US, but across the world, there are instances, there are flashpoints. I would like to believe that we are in a flashpoint in history. And that we've reached breaking point now. Things have to change significantly, meaningfully for ordinary people. Otherwise, these ideas take root in communities, and what we saw on the streets of the Capitol on Wednesday will spread to the areas, and that is where you have to worry. It is when it goes back to the communities and builds, that's where it's dangerous. How can the next administration prevent that from happening? And the first thing I will say is they cannot pretend it doesn't exist by saying this is not America. This is America. This is the world. We are divided like we have never been divided before. And that just doesn't just go for America. So the first thing that has to happen is the new administration has to admit there's a problem. And there's a very real problem. And what that problem is, there is proper division in America on social, on economic issues that needs to be solved. And how do you guys, or how would you like the next administration, even though they probably won't do it, how do you see the next 4 years of a presidency changing the narrative? Or can it?
Acknowledging that white supremacy is a major, major problem in this country and taking the necessary steps to target and, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, Jesus. Starts with a D. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Just get rid of the problem. It starts with a D. It's not disseminate, and I can't think of the word, to get rid of this issue. But another thing that they need to do is actually crack down on Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms where a lot of this misinformation and disinformation has been allowed to fester and putrefy for years. Because obviously Facebook and Twitter aren't going to do it themselves.
Yeah. Well, until America as a nation recognizes that the problem is American and it is white supremacy, then we're not going to get anything meaningful done. We cannot sit here and pretend it's long ago and far away, or that that's just something that happens in other countries. We have to take a look at ourselves as a country, face ourselves in the mirror and say, no, this is us. We have to be better. We haven't been better to this point, but we have to be now. And I don't really feel like we're going to get anything substantial done, but if there are any kind of, laws passed, or if there's, God forbid, any more money pumped into the military and the police, it won't be used to root out any kind of white supremacy. It'll be used against Black and Indigenous protesters and dissenters. That's the way it's always happened. We see shows of force for Indigenous people asking for clean water, and we saw tissue paper at the Capitol, the heart of our nation's lawmaking center. And until we address that, it's not going to get fixed. It's not even going to begin to get fixed. And the tweet that I saw this morning was, you don't negotiate with a tumor, you don't ignore a tumor, you cut out the tumor.
Yep.
And this idea of white supremacy, of no consequences, of violence unchecked, and all of that, it's a tumor. It's cancerous, it's spreading, and we have to address it or it's going to spread more.
Exactly. And another issue is we need a government that actually recognizes the needs of its people and works to serve them, because that's a big part of the problem. Left wing and right wing, most Americans feel like they've been left out by the political process, that it doesn't serve them anymore. And that is going to foment a lot of, this is not really the right word to use, but dissatisfaction with the government, which can in turn lead to things like this.
I mean, they showed that they really are they're going to abandon us in our time of need. Like, people are starving. There's food lines in Texas, and people are struggling to pay rent in a pandemic because they can't work. And our government's like, well, I thought $600 should be enough, right? I mean, you guys are fine with $600. That's a lot.
I love the one.
Here's another.
It was a tweet or something that said $600 is what rich people think poor people think is a lot of money.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Blue Marble Science brings up a very interesting point. This is the problem with free speech. We've been led to believe that it's free. It really isn't, though. It's free as long as you agree with it. Other speech should be censored, right? No. Can I just explain this? Free speech is earned. Quite frankly, it is earned by participating in a society. It is earned by the freedoms by which you fight for those freedoms. There is, for instance, we have laws in the country to prevent speeding. Why do we prevent speeding? We prevent speeding because it kills people. We have laws that says you can't just violently attack another person. These are societal norms. This is the social contract that we create as a society. You can have free speech as long as it does not impact the real life of another person. So he's clarified it. Hate speech isn't free speech. And the problem that I see is free speech is misinterpreted as to what it means.
Yes,
nobody
historical
actually
philosopher
understands what
just
it
said
means.
free speech also doesn't mean what most people think that it means, and that is very much true. People think I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, and that no, free speech, at least here in the U.S., simply means that for most of what you say, the government, this says nothing about private institutions, the government can't target. It was mainly a way to protect people who were criticizing the government from the government. That's really why free speech was enacted in this country, because people in England at the time didn't have that right. If you spoke against the king or the parliament at the time, you could be targeted and thrown in jail.
To some extent, we still are. But the point of it is free speech. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say there. Free speech is about saying what you have a right to say, again, as long as it doesn't impact the lives of others. But it's not free from consequence. And again, it comes back to consequences. There are a lot of people that come on here into some chats on YouTube and say, I'm here because I can, and they get upset because they've been deleted, their comments have been deleted because they're bullshit, or they've been timed out or whatever, and say, I thought you believed in free speech. I do believe in free speech. Free speech is not without consequence. If you come into my chat and you talk, and this is why I've left Irish Dublin Girl as a mod. If you come in here and disagree with what we're saying on the panel or what we're saying in the chat, that does not give you a right to go without being challenged. That's the difference. I know a lot of people, I have friends on the left who would say, for instance, deplatforming people. And I know a lot of people that talk about free speech, but yet when Nathan Thompson's channel was shut down, they all fucking cheered, right?
That part. That part.
Right.
That part.
That hurts my heart. I don't like Nathan Thompson. I don't like a lot of the conspiracy theorists online. But they're going to say what they're going to say, and they are not free from being challenged. And that's the difference. The only way of having real conversations is to allow these people to come out of the woodwork and allow them to air what they have to say. They're not immune from being challenged. Whereas without free speech, and we don't have free speech in Ireland, believe it or not, up until 2-3 years ago, I think, we had a law in our constitution that said we could not blaspheme, which actually nearly led to Stephen Fry being prosecuted for being blasphemous on Irish television. So even with that, but again, free speech is something that is earned. You earn it in respect to what you do in society. You're complicit in this conversation that we are having in society, but you are not free from the consequences of it. If you go and for instance say that that the Holocaust doesn't exist, that their numbers weren't as high as they say, then if you are breaching a company's rule book, yeah, they have the right to fucking sack you. If you walk into the Capitol and break open a window or are just there, your insurance company that you work for has the right to sack you because you have gone against their policies. I'm sorry. Free speech doesn't mean you can't say or do what you want to do, again, as long as it doesn't impact another human being. But it also doesn't mean that you are free from consequences. And that has to be said.
I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it right now. Look me in the eye as a Jewish woman and say that I need to sit down and listen to a Nazi. Look me in the face and say it. These people want me dead. I will not give them a platform. Why are we platforming them? Do you see what Germany did after World War II? They freaking rooted it out, banned that speech. The fact that we even acknowledge that hate speech laws exist tells us we know there's a difference between types of speech. We know that there's stuff that's not allowed legally and socially. And to get up there and treat it like, oh, well, it's just two different sides of an argument.
Nope.
That's irresponsible. That I can't even give words to it. The kind of anger that raises in me, telling me, well, the people that believe that, folks who are protesting for civil rights and the folks that want to disenfranchise and murder black people, yeah, those are the same. You should totally
they're not the same. I'm not saying they're the same.
You don't platform those kinds of speech not because they're just ideas, it's just words, it's because it causes harm.
Mm-hmm.
It leads to harm. It incites harm. That's why we have hate speech laws. Someone going, the Holocaust didn't happen. Oh, well, that's just words. That's not just words, because there are people out there making 6 million wasn't enough shirts and saying Camp Auschwitz as if that's just something you do. Like, oh no, we should just listen to their grievances.
Well, I'm sorry. Ugly German Truths makes an important point. He says, I wish we had rooted it out, but mostly it was driven into the fringes and underground and kept out of daylight so everybody could pretend that it wasn't there anymore and it's trying to come back. This is the problem that I see. I didn't mean deplatform as in I would give them a platform. I'm saying when, again, it comes back to the idea that this isn't America. Or these weren't Americans. They fucking were. This is a problem. And part of the issue that I have seen both in sociology and activism, in the whole political sphere, is that we are not able anymore. And I don't mean the likes of yourself and Leo. I mean, in general, we don't have the capability of having these arguments and beating them down where they deserve to be beaten down. I have friends who make very excellent points who would say, one person sitting in an audience on a debate again about fascism, if one person came out of that meeting thinking that fascism was in the right, that's one person too many. And while I agree with that to an extent, having someone outside of a building talking about fascism, by just screaming in their faces, for me, it's not about who you're debating, it's about who's possibly listening. And you're not going to win that argument by pretending that it's not an argument, by pretending it doesn't exist. It does exist. Everybody needs to be aware of these arguments and how to actually combat it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we can be absolutist on, and I believe we really, really need to look critically at what we consider free speech and platforming, and the kind of behaviors that it encourages and nurtures. As long as we allow people to get away with going, yeah, the Holocaust didn't happen, you don't allow that to go on. not only is it factual history backed up by thousands of photos, documents, survivors, and witnesses, but it is contributing to that conspiracy theory. The conspiracy, oh, well, there's a they in charge, and there you can't trust this, and it's the Jews, and it's the this, and it's the that. No. And these are people that have been through school. We all went to the same history classes. You may not have spent, the same amount of weeks or days on it. This is not ignorance. It's willful denial. And that's harmful. That's actively harmful. And I can't get over that feeling that I saw when they were posting the video of the guys putting up a wooden cross outside the Capitol. And then like a few yards away, there was a scaffold with a noose on it. And then people wearing Nazi shirts. You don't separate this out. This isn't people going, well, I just have some disagreements with the government. Guys, disagreements with the government is, I don't like this budget, or, hey, this district isn't being drawn right, or, hey, guys, the infrastructure budget is not good. We need to work on our infrastructure versus this, that, and the other. That's a disagreement with your government. It's not what happened.
Let's kill black people.
It's not let's kill black people. Let's bust into the Capitol, take hostages, and, freaking take down our nation's flag and replace it with a demagogue's, and then fly a freaking enemy nation's flag in the building.
Yep. That is that. A quote keeps coming to mind that Aaron Ra says frequently, and I think it sums up these people's mentalities very, very well. Ignorance isn't just what you don't know; it's what you refuse to know.
Yeah. Good.
And with that, I'm going to draw this to a close. We've been going for almost 2 hours, and I'm seriously, guys, thank you for coming on.
Oh, no problem.
This is a discussion that needed to be had. And I mean, we're not going to agree on everything, which is great. But it was definitely a discussion that needs to be had. It's going to go forward, and only time will tell what happens from here on in. I do hope there are serious consequences to everyone that incited and took part in what happened on Wednesday. Again, I don't think it was, I'm not going to say as bad, because it was absolutely fucking horrendous. But it's just, it is what it is, and we'll see what comes out of it. Leo, what's coming up for you? What have you got going on in the next little while?
I really don't know. Before I can really pump out a lot of the content that I'd like to start doing, I have to wait for my $600 check to get here so that I can buy an iPad, so that I can actually do little doodles and stuff, because I don't have a way of doing that without using a mouse, and that's just not gonna. I don't know how to draw with a mouse, so that's not gonna work. At some point, I'm gonna make a video just talking about just a brief overview of what's happened this past week and what it means and where we go from there. But I was also going to say, you should drop both of our channels, both me and Vishanti, I believe it is, in either in the description or in the live chat. I'm assuming she probably
they will be in the description, definitely.
Awesome.
My personal channel doesn't have anything on it, but I do participate in panels on iNetwork and on the Nest Bunker 33. We'll be kind of touching on a similar topic to this tomorrow, so I can get you the links for those if you want.
Yeah, and I'll put them I'll put them in the description below. As for myself, I will be doing a live stream going forward every week. They will be going, the first one is on my channel, 11:30 a.m. UTC, with Steam and Cup of Reason. If you haven't heard of Steam and Cup of Reason, he basically did my my avatar. He is an absolutely fantastic creator. He runs the Pain of Progress series. And we're just going to have some light banter and a few guests and a bit of a chat.
I'm so
and
excited
whatever.
for that. I saw that.
I can't wait.
And I was like, yes!
I'm looking forward to it, because he doesn't really get much of a chance, because there's so many other people on the shows, and because he lives in Vietnam, he has a unique view. When it's daylight over here, it's nighttime over here, over for him. So it's a perfect timing for both of us, because it's morning for me, it's evening for him, and we're just going to have a bit of fun. So 11:30 a.m. on Sundays. The first one is going to be on my channel. Then we're going to go over to his. His details are already linked in the description below. Go check him out if you haven't already. Give him a subscribe. Make sure you're there for the Sundays. So this Sunday is on my channel. Next Sunday is on his, and we'll alternate from there. Yeah, as I said before, I am currently working on a series based around the social contract and what that actually means. Again, freedom of speech is going to be in there as well. So keep an eye out, because there's a few other things that's going to come on. And Vishanti is going to be joining me every month. Aren't you, Vishanti? I roped her in. As you can see, I love Vishanti.
You had to totally twist my arm.
Oh, yeah.
You had to drag me kicking and screaming.
I love the way your mind works. So there is going to be a live stream once a month with Conspiracy Cats, Vishanti, and a few others. And it's going to look at why the issues that we have in our society are issues, and have a little conversation around them. So keep tuned, because and again, the challenge on conspiracies is going to be is going to continue. It's going to be broadened, so it's going to look at everything from anti-science to anti-health to flat Earth to 9/11 debunking. It's going to get quite broad, and my patrons. Yes, I have a Patreon. Again, it's linked in the description below. If you do want to help out the channel, the links are there. My patrons are going to choose which subject I'm going to cover. So that's going to be fun. And yeah, besides that, please keep safe. Please wear your second masks. And don't be an asshole, basically.
And if you have grievances, like right now, you don't have to go break into a federal building. Call your representatives. Email them. Literally, if you
in a healthy way.
Every hour on the hour, you can do it. Like, make your voice heard, man. You don't have to be violent like that. You don't have to arm yourself to the teeth and go do all that clown shit.
Exactly. And remember, people, eviscerate the bourgeois and seize the means of production.
Damn right. Solidarity.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I will see you very, very soon.